Hi, this is Andrea Walford, mixed media artist and founder of Paper Crafters Library. In today's art journal inspiration video, I'm going to share with you my process for creating the Soar art journal page. Now this page is quite a bit more intricate than the pages I've shared with you over the last few weeks, and it took quite a bit longer, so I ended up having to break my video in two parts. So here in part 2 of this video, we're now going to add our little textural details and the final embellishments and finishing up this Soar art journal page. If you missed part 1 of this video where we created the foundation of this page, then make sure you take a minute to watch that before moving on to part 2. So let's continue on. So now that I've finished drying the acrylic paint on my page, I've placed my journal inside an old box. This I bought, came when I bought my boys their boots, and I use this every time I'm doing any kind of spritzing. And I have my journal in there, and I'm going to be using this Crafters Workshop template. This is, I think this one's called Tile Texture, and I'm going to try this Maya Mist Popsicle Blue. So it's quite a deep blue, and we're going to see how that looks. I'm not 100%, but I like working with the templates to add texture in my pages, so we're going to try this one and see how it goes. Hopefully we'll like it. And I'm just gonna, okay, that's not wanting to work. Ooh, there we go. So I'm just spritzing it over my template. And then I'm gonna take a roll of paper towels and I'm just gonna press and roll to absorb the excess. Oh, that looks really cool. And there you can see the texture that leaves behind. So I'm just going to take this out of the box and dry it, and then we'll move on. So I've dried my page, and now I'm going to try this other template. This is called Mini Chicken Wire Reversed. It's a 6x6 template from Crafters Workshop, and I'm just taking some paper towels covering the rest of my page, and then I'm going to use this Mr. Huey's Calico White mist, and I'm just making sure I shake that really well, and then we're going to spritz that on there. I'm just going to take my paper towel, kind of blot the excess. Let's see if that showed up. Oh, see what I really like that. That looks so cool. And you can see it just gives your page some really nice texture. So we're going to try that on this side. So I'm just going to cover up my page like this again, and then I'm going to spray, blot, and use my heat tool to dry off, or my heat tool to dry that mist, just like I did with the tile texture one. So let's take a look at that. Oh wow, I love that. There you can see what a cool texture that adds to the page. And right there you can just see how the layers start to build. So I'm going to give this a dry. So I've added a couple of, used a couple of templates to add different colors of mist. Now I'm going to take this stamp called Royal Script from the Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous company, and I'm going to first make sure it's right side up. Then I'm going to take my Ranger Archival Jet Black ink. This is my absolute favorite line of inks when I'm doing any of my mixed media work. I always use the Ranger Archival because they're permanent, they're waterproof, and they work on a bunch of different surfaces. So as you can see, I've inked up my stamp, and then I'm just going to, I'm holding it kind of curved, and I'm just going to press it. I don't even see anything. Okay, let's try that again. Let's press it harder. Well, that's kind of neat. So you can just see it shows up a little bit. It's because there's so much texture with that netting from May Arts that that netting gave the page a lot of texture, that this is not going to stamp very clearly, but as you can see, it does add, you can see it a little bit, and it just adds a really neat texture to the page. So I'm just going to continue inking it up and then applying it to the page. I think I'll leave it. I'm not trying to get a clear impression, I do want it to look patchy and just to add some texture to my page, so I think I'm going to leave it like that. Now you did see the paint wasn't totally dry, it did pick it up here, so I am going to make sure that I wipe that off with the wipe so it doesn't dry on there and ruin my stamp. So I'm just going to dry this with my heat tool and take a minute to figure out what else I want to do with this. So I'm back with my journal in the box. I'm kind of feeling like this tile texture is a little bit too predominant, it stands out too much, so I'm going to see if I can mute it using another stencil. This one is another Crafters Workshop stencil called Cosmic Swirl, and this time I've chosen this SEI Tumble Dye. I don't even know what color this is. It's just a really pretty turquoise color, and we're going to see how that looks. I'm not going to spray it everywhere because it has quite a few open gaps, but I just want to see how that looks. Well, that's kind of neat. It's not very obvious. It's kind of a subtle. Actually, I don't even know if you can really see anything. You can kind of see it. It's kind of cool, and it kind of mutes the tile, well, a little bit. So I'm going to dry that, and then I'm going to take a moment again to think about what I want to do with this, because I'm kind of stuck right now. So I've decided to leave my background for now because I'm not quite sure what else I want to do with that. And I'm going to now work on my birds. I have here some Tim Holtz tissue tape, and I think what I'm just going to do is I'm going to take my tissue tape and I'm just going to use it to wrap around my birds. Now, one of the things that's really nice about this tissue tape is because it's so lightweight, it really forms and shapes around chipboard shapes really nicely. So I'm just kind of overlapping it a little bit, and as you can see, it tears really easily. And then I'm just going to essentially use that and wrap it around my chipboard piece until it's completely covered. And I think I'm going to do that with all of my chipboard pieces. So just the same thing that you see me doing, I'm just going to continue doing that with all of my chipboard pieces, and then we'll be back. So there you can see what my birds now look like, that they've been covered with the tissue tape. So I'm going to set my journal aside and I'm going to work on my birds. I think what I want to do is I want to mute the tape, the pattern on the tape a little bit. I don't want it to be quite so obvious. So for that, I'm going to take that gesso that you saw me put on my palette earlier, and I'm taking a damp paintbrush and I'm just going to brush it over. And what you see here, especially if the paintbrush is quite wet, so if you use, you don't want it dripping, but you do want it quite damp, and what that does is it creates more of a whitewash effect. It kind of, I don't know what, I can't remember what the word is now, dilutes the paint a little bit, makes it more, not quite as opaque, thins it, that's the word I'm looking for. It thins my paint. And then this way, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to do the same thing to the other two, and then if I feel like it still needs a little bit more, if it's still, actually I think that may be good. You can always go back and add another layer. It really depends on how much of that pattern you want to show through. But you can see, you can still see the pattern through, but this really mutes the intensity of the pattern. So I'm just going to dry that and see how I like this once it's dry, and see whether or not I want to go back and do anything else to it in terms of adding another coat of the gesso. So I added a second layer of that whitewashed gesso, or that thinned down gesso, and dried it, and now I'm going to add a little bit more texture to my birds using this script stamp from the French marketplace, Tim Holtz Stampers Anonymous stamp, and my Ranger Archival ink. This little script stamp is one of my favorite stamps for adding texture onto my art journal pages and mixed media canvases. You can see how cool that looks. There, I think I'll ink this up again. I'm not too worried about it stamping perfectly. In mixed media and art journaling, I never like anything to look too perfect. So there you can see I finished stamping all of my birds. So my next step now is to just make sure that the ink is dry so that it doesn't smear when I add a little bit of color to it. Okay, so I've dried my ink, and now I think I'm just going to take a damp paintbrush and pick up a little bit of that cobalt teal color that I had left in my palette and just kind of brush it along the edge of my bird. Whoa, that is too much. If ever you find when you're working with your, well, with anything, with your pages, with something like this, that you accidentally put too much paint or medium on there, you can always go in with a baby wipe and pull back some of that color. Baby wipes are awesome for that. So there you can see how it just has a little bit of a blue tinge. So I'm just going to go do the same thing to the rest of my birds. So I finished with my birds. I put a little bit of the darker blue, this turquoise phthalo, just along the bottom of each of the birds just to give it a little bit more shadow, because I really liked how that looked. And I'm planning on putting them on my page like this. Now to stick them onto my page, I'm going to be using some of this Helmar 450 quick dry adhesive. You could also use a hot glue. I'm not sure if I'm completely liking everything on this page, but honestly I'm not really sure what else to do at the moment. So I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to add my birds, I'm going to add my letters, and then we'll just see if there's anything else that I want to add here. So I'm just, because this glue is fairly thick, I'm adding it just kind of to the center of the bird, because when I press it down onto my page it is going to squish out a little bit, but if I keep it more to the center of the chipboard, then when I press it down it's not going to, you're not going to see it come out the sides. So then I'm just going to press and hold, and I'm just going to go ahead and stick the remaining two birds down. So I've gone ahead and I've stuck down my birds. Now I'm feeling like I kind of want something around the edges, so I'm going to do a little experiment here. I have this Wow embossing powder, color blend verdigris, and I've seen it on paper, looks really pretty, and it has kind of a greeny turquoisey tinge to it, so I kind of want to see what it's going to look like around the edge of my pages. So I'm going to take my Versamark pad and I'm just going to kind of pat it around the edge of my page. Now I really don't know how this is going to go. I could love it or I could hate it, but either way I'm committing to it, because once it's on there I'm not going to be able to take it off. So I'm just holding my book over a coffee filter and sprinkling this verdigris over where I pat the Versamark. And now I'm just going to take my heat tool and heat that, or melt the powder. Yeah, I seriously love how that looks. As you can see, and I don't know if the camera can pick this up, it has a really pretty gold glint to it with the green and a little bit of the turquoise. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to do that exact same thing you saw me do all around the entire perimeter of my art journal page. So there you can see what that looks like all around the edges of my page. I didn't do it right in the very middle, but I did it along the top, along the bottom. Really like how that looks. Now, it just occurred to me, one of the things that I should have done to my birds, which I completely forgot, is edge it in black. I really like to do that with my chipboard pieces. I should have done it ahead of time, but since I didn't, I'm going to see if I can very carefully take the corner of my ink pad and hopefully without wrecking it, drag it along, not wrecking my ink pad, but without wrecking my page. I'm going to try to drag this kind of along the edges, and what that does is it just kind of gives my bird a little bit of definition. So I'm going to do the best I can getting in with the edge of my ink pad in here. I'm going to do that for all three birds, and then I'll come back and show you what that looks like. there you can see what that looks like with all my birds edged in that black. It actually looks really cool. Now for my letters, I'm going to be using these Tim Holtz Ideology Alpha Parts Ransom. They're like a plastic type letter, and they're attached to this frame, and I just took some heavy duty scissors and I cut the letters that I wanted, and I cut letters to spell the word soar. I'd been debating whether I wanted it to say soar or fly, and ultimately I decided on soar. So here you can see I have my letters. Now these letters do have an adhesive backing already, but they don't, the adhesive isn't going to stick to this mesh because it's so highly textured. So I am going to be using some multi-medium. But I'm actually thinking, I don't know if I want the plastic or whether or not, well, you know what, maybe I will leave it the plastic. I kind of like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush, I'm going to take my multi-medium mat, and I'm going to place my medium underneath. Actually, I may just place it at the back of my letter. That may be a little bit easier. And I'm going to stick that onto my page. Now right now, as you can see, it's coming off very easily in my hand. That's just because the medium is not dry, but once the medium is dry, it's going to hold like cement. So the letters will stay no problem. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish sticking on my letters, and I'm going to stick them on because the letters are kind of all different shapes and sizes. I'm not going to worry about making the letters all straight and even. I want them to look a little bit off center. So as you can see, my letters are now stuck down. And I'm looking at my page and I was trying to figure out, to me it's missing something. I really like the little bit of gold that you see here around the edges from the verdigris embossing powder that I used, but I kind of feel like it needs a little bit more bling. I absolutely love bling. So I'm going to try some of this Stampendous Champagne glass glitter that I have. And I'm going to see, hopefully I won't be too heavy-handed. It's probably going to want to get stuck between the texture of that netting that I used, but I'm just going to try, see what happens if I just put a little bit of medium and then using my fingers just very lightly sprinkle on some of this champagne glitter. And I actually think I'm going to do that in several spots on my page. And what this is going to do, whoops, I did not mean to do that. I just dumped that in my medium. Put some here. And what that's going to do is give the page some subtle shine. As long as you're not too heavy-handed doing this. So as you can see, while I do this, I'm just going to talk to you here a little bit more about art journaling and some of my thoughts behind it. As you can see, in this page I've diddled around, I guess you could say, quite a bit, adding a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's simply because each time I just never quite felt like it was where I wanted it to be. I find this whole process quite relaxing, so some of when I'm doing this is because, well, it's just kind of fun to do, and it's easy to keep going. If you've art journaled before, you'll find that this can be quite an addictive process to just keep adding little touches here and there. Everything I add into my journal has some kind of meaning to me. I love birds, I love butterflies. For me, they're depictions of soaring and reaching for your dreams. I love sparkle. It doesn't have any particular meaning to me, I just love it, so I like to add it in one form or another to my pages. I always look for inspirational words like soar. I love texture, I love script, so I incorporate all that kind of thing into my pages. So now, I think actually, now that I've added that little bit of gold, I'm really happy with where this page is. I'm going to help, as you can see, the gold's kind of coming up in my finger. So what I'm going to do is, once it's sort of had a chance to set in the medium and the medium's dried a little bit, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to spray my whole page with a fixative to help keep everything in place. But there you can see my art journal page is now done, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this process. This is quite a bit more involved than the other videos I've shown you so far, and that's just because what I do in art journaling, sometimes it's quick and easy, and sometimes it's just very relaxing and therapeutic and fun to spend a lot more time on your pages. Well, I hope you enjoyed this journal page, and I'll be back again next week with some more art journaling inspiration.